have another copy of the quiz?
Yeah, I do. You can take that copy with you. All right. No, not share, present, sorry. So, just a couple of things as we get started. I do want to let you know that I recognize that you're all professionals. So I'm not going to treat you like you're not. And if you ever feel like I don't, check me on that. So that's the first thing. Is there a difference between going to Harvard and going to North Tennessee?
Yes.
Yes.
It's who you pay for the bribes to get.
Oh, come on! Oh, I'm trying to stay out of that. Stay out of that.
Well,
Who
you
you
have
pay
to
for the bribes,
right?
Although I don't think that Harvard was listed in those schools, so that's it's fair to use Harvard, right? What might be the difference between Hennepin Tech and Harvard?
Money.
So the money, right? So let's just say, all things considered, the money is the same. So you were able to get a scholarship to either or both, or you were able to pay financially for either or both. What would be the difference? So let's take cost out of that course. So what about the courses?
Harvard has law school.
So Harvard has a law school. What else? What else might be different? So the job you get after you participate in Harvard. What else? So scholarships. Okay, so you can get scholarship to play football at Harvard. What else might you get?
Quality is better.
Quality. Say more about that. How is the quality better?
Better teachers and
You have more educated teachers. You have so in terms of the workload associated with being at Harvard and being at North Hennepin, and given all of the things that you've provided as the framework. Do you think that the workload or the expectation of the workload would be the same at both? Probably not, and I can't say for sure, right? But I'm going to make a guess because I've only attended Harvard's classes for a few classes. I've never attended at North Hennepin, and I know that they're fine teachers, but I also know that the teachers that I sat under at Harvard have lots and lots of books that they've written, and they teach other classes and all sorts of stuff, right? What I'd like for you to understand is that you are in Harvard. You're in Harvard. What I mean by that is that the chief is very clear about the kind of community, police officers he wants to create. And for some folks, I've gotten back to the reviews about other stuff, and they're like, I'm tired of hearing about diversity. I'm tired of all of this stuff. And you should be. Because I bet those kids, those students at Harvard, are tired of that big, heavy course load that they have. But what do they get at the end? They get that education. They get the reputation. People get to say, I went to Harvard, and that means something. And you'll be able to say whatever your next career move is, or maybe this is the end of your career. I don't know where you are in your career ladder, but you can say, I was a police officer in Maple Grove, and it will mean something. So I want you to think about this as we talk about this diversity stuff. And I know for many of us that we are either forced or mandated or whatever word you want to use. Think about that, but don't let that stop you from the growth and development that can occur for you in this process. Right? So no, you are professional, and I don't want to treat you any less than that. What I will tell you about me is my name is Andre Koen, and I was a middle school and high school social studies teacher for 8 years. So there's not much you can throw at me that I can't handle, right? So middle schoolers are a handful. I also taught at Bethel University in the education department, and I taught teachers how to help close the so-called achievement gap, right? Which I typically like to talk about is an opportunity gap, actually. That kids can achieve at the same kind of level, because the ultimate minority is the one. And the ultimate person accountable for each one's destiny is the one, right? So sometimes you'll hear left people talk about, the multitude of diversity, but if you trickle all that diversity down, you get one. And you hear conservative people talking about the one that's responsible for changing their lives is the one. And so what we end up with is the same kind of things, but we have different methodologies, right? So there's that. I currently work at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, so I drove up this morning so that we could have this conversation. And there I am the program director for diversity and inclusion for the enterprise of Mayo. So Phoenix, Arizona, Arizona, Florida, the Midwest, and Rochester. So we do all the programming for that. So I know a little bit about the topic, and we will take a kind of a social studies approach to talking about this topic today. All right. So not a whole lot of psychobabble, not a whole lot of touchy-feely kind of stuff, but really laying out some of the principles by which we should be doing our work. All right. So I have my agenda. You have, I think that's like 8 pages of handout that I'd like to go through. I have PowerPoint stuff here. But I would be remiss if I did not ask you, what kinds of things were you hoping or would like to talk about given this time? I know, what I do know from a little bird, you are the day shift. And I also, for many of you, are the day shift. And I also know what that means, which means for some folks have been in this career longer than I've been alive. For other folks, it means that you come with a wealth of knowledge. And so I want to capitalize on that wealth of knowledge as we have conversation. All right? So what were some of the things you were hoping we would talk about or would like to talk about given the time that we have left? As you heard about this topic, as you thought about it, what were you hoping we might talk about? What would you like to talk about? I have more patience than a broke bar. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead and we British that. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll repeat that. She said, how do we close the gap of the mistrust between police and communities? Thank you.
I guess a question on that is people in minority communities feel like they prejudge them, and as a result, they prejudge us because we are the police. We are everything that they expect. So, how do we overcome that?
Yeah, I heard someone say racism. Is that, did I hear correctly? and I thought maybe that was related to his comment of the prejudgment. So we'll pay attention to that, right? So how do we overcome the prejudgment that people have about us because they think we've already prejudged them? Other things the folks would like to talk about.
At what point does, right now, you know, this is a mandatory course.
Yep.
And it's based on us being racist, based on false allegations or incorrect allegations with that. So what type of outreach do you do to the community who feels that way about us? To try to impart on them that we aren't that way? What kind of outreach do you do? You're giving us a class. So how do you do outreach to the community? You haven't met me.
So let's talk about a real personal question. So I'll personally.
Every time I deal with a minority a lot of times, I'm racist. It's not because that person did anything wrong according to them, it's because I'm racist. That's why we're here. No other reason.
I don't think that is the case, but
Virtually everyone here does.
okay. I'll take that on, right? So one of the things that I believe is that anyone ever been in a relationship with an intimate partner, and what happens when the intimate partner says, it'll come back to me, let me go back to my original. So there's a couple of things about that. One is, how many of us are capitalists? Raise your hand if you are a capitalist. Okay, let me ask it another way. Raise your hand if you use money to make transactions for goods and services in the United States. Raise your hand if you use money to make transactions to, okay. You are a capitalist. Whether you do it or not, you are a capitalist, right? Now, particularly in the United States, what is the name of the units that we make to create that transaction? So to operate that transaction, what are those units called? They're called dollars, right? Now, I find it interesting that we call them dollars. And even if it's not paper money, as we transfer it electronically, right? Like I haven't seen a paycheck in a very long time because it goes directly into my account. I haven't seen it. Anybody seen it? Yeah, okay. And we know that the interesting thing about money too is that originally the paper was to represent gold, because you couldn't carry gold all around, right? What now is our money based on? What is our money based on in the United States? What's that? So say it one more time.
Well, it's supposed to be still based on gold, but it's not. It's kind of nothing.
No, it's actually moved into based on GDP. It's supposed to be based on GDP.
It's supposed to
That's
be.
not the case either.
Yep. So it is based on faith. It is based on faith. So one of the things about the economy that people are concerned about is that's wrong, right? Is that our creditors will call the credit. They will call for they will call to be paid what they've been lending, right? And the thing that frightens folks is that we don't have the money to pay what we owe, right? And so that's frightening. But we also have to recognize that we're capitalists, and so we use the currency of capitalism to make transactions. Right? I'm going to say something that may seem inflammatory, but I want you to think about it in the light of what we just talked about in terms of being a capitalist. Right? Are all dollars created the same? Are all dollars worth the same?
You mean denomination-wise?
Oh, so say that again?
You mean by denomination?
By denomination. So what is a denomination?
It's an indication of the value of an individual of multiple dollars.
So it is the indication of the separation of the value of multiple dollars, right? Now, this may seem inflammatory, but I want you to consider this. We are all racist. Every last single one of us is racist. Hearing that, the question shouldn't be, oh my God, or I want to be defensive. The question should be, what am I doing for racist? And here's how I know that we are all racist, right? Because we're all racist, right? Please raise your hand if you have a racial category. If you filled out on somebody's form at some point in time a racial category, please raise your hand. You have a race in a racist society. So the question isn't, am I racist? It's actually, what do I do with my racism? I am capitalist. The problem isn't being a capitalist, it's what do I do with my capitalism? How do I spend my money? Where do I put my resources? How does that stuff work? So one thing I want you to reframe your thinking is the defensiveness about people saying that I'm racist. Of course I'm racist. I'm in a racist society. And I hope to make the point of that today. Not to say, to slam us, to make us feel bad, but so that we can take cognitive control about what we do. So I'm not operating off of guilt or shame or blame or somebody trying to force me into doing something, but I'm acting in the world as a thinking, loving human being as I hold people accountable for stuff they don't want to be accountable for. I do not want to be pulled over for speeding. But I appreciate the fact that somebody's job is to stand on that wall and make sure we're all following the rules. The biggest thing about that scandal with the people paying bribes is, you know what, to be quite honest, if we had enough money to do it, we probably would do it too. The real problem is they skip line, they jump line. If it's good enough for us to have to stand in line and struggle and that kind of stuff, why should they be able to? And that's really what the concern about that is, right? They skip line. You don't want people skipping the line in the grocery store or the other thing, and that's really our concern with that, right? So there's that. So when you asked me specifically, you said, well, what do you do? So one of the things that I use as a mantra is that I do not address lies. I don't address lies because we get into this whole tit for tat, you said, I said. So I don't get into to addressing lies. I outlive them. I outlive lies, right? So if someone says, Andre, you're sexist, and if this has happened to me, I've been in a presentation, I'm giving my information, somebody stands up and they say, you are sexist, and this is what you said, blah, blah, blah. I bow down, I say, look, I'm human first, but watch my life. Watch my life. And so every step, and it's so funny, the same woman who stood up and said that in a presentation, when I've been out in the community doing stuff, I see her with my family and my daughters, and she waves and I wave. And then one day she came up to me at another training, I was doing some training, she was in the hallway, and she came in and she said, you are such a great guy. Thank you so much for doing this work. I was like, wait a minute, I thought I was the enemy, right? But if I spend all my time trying to defend myself, then it's that's what it was. Intimate partner relationship, right? Have you ever been in like a disagreement or argument, and one of the partners says, you're being defensive? What just happened? No communication can now occur after that's been laid out on the table. Why? Whatever you say, because they play the ultimate card, whatever you say is going to appear to be defensive, whether you're trying to defend what you said or not, whether you're trying to explain more or whatever. So anytime an intimate partner puts that on the table, I'm like, you win. But I'm going to outlive what you just accused me of. I'm going to show you through my actions, right? So there's that. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
See, that didn't answer my question whatsoever. Because my question was, right now, the police are stigmatized because people have said we're racist, so in reaction to that, we have politicians, different boards, we have administrations who force us to come into classes like this because a small minority of people say that we're racist. Now, my question to you was, not what do you do, but what do you do to address that with the community that are making those accusations as opposed to us? You just, like you said, we're all racist. Do you go out to groups and say, we're all racist that aren't police groups?
In other words, you educate the other, so to speak, the other side of the conflict.
Or is it just us?
I'm
Are we
saying,
the only problem?
I'm saying do wherever I go.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, do you go out to groups other than us and do that?
So, I
That's
will
a simple
answer
question.
that.
Do
I
you
will,
or don't
I
you?
will answer your question very succinctly, and then I will move on. And the answer is yes. And if you want to know more about how and when and why, go to my website. It's andrekoen.com. Sign up for some workshops. You can see a calendar of workshops that I do in the community. So I can answer that succinctly, and I would like to do more. All right, so let's do this. So let's turn to page. Let's turn to page 2, because your question is very pertinent to this piece on page 2. So, Plato's allegory of the cave. Are people familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave? Have you heard of Plato? Who is Plato? Famous philosopher, right? So let's go to page 2. And I have to put on my glasses because I'm over 40. So imagine prisoners chained since childhood deep inside a cave. Not only are their limbs immobilized by the chains, but their heads are as well, since their eyes are fixed on a wall. And behind the prisoners is an enormous fire, and between the fire and the prisoners is a raised wall, along which may carry shapes of various plants, animals, and other things. The shapes cast shadows on the wall, which occupy the prisoner's attention. When one of the shape carriers speaks, an echo coming from. Also, when one of the shape carriers speaks, an echo against the wall will cause the prisoners to believe that the words are coming from the shadows. The prisoners engage in what appears to be a game, however, naming the shapes as they come by. This, however, is the only reality they know, even though they are only seeing mere shadows of images. Are people familiar with this story? Okay, so what do you recognize is problematic in the story already? What might be some of the challenges that we might want to address in the story already? So we have people that are chained, right? The story doesn't say how they got there, but we do know that they weren't born there. It doesn't say they were born there, right? So we have people chained. What else do we see? That they're misinterpreting information, right? So it's shadows, as if they are talking, and as if they're real. What else? Do we see in this part? What other challenge? What's that? That's their only reality. And how long have they been there? Since childhood. Is a cave a place for children? No. Who typically will we find, or what will we typically find in a cave? Bats, bears, lions, tigers, bears, oh my. Right? All right, cool. So let's keep going. Suppose the prisoner is released and compelled to stand up and turn around. His eyes will be so blinded by the firelight that the shapes passing will appear less real than the shadows. This would no doubt cause the prisoner confusion, fear, and anger. Suppose then that he is dragged up out of the cave and into the sunlight. His eyes would be so blinded that he would not be able to see anything. At first, he'd be able to see darker shapes, such as shadows, and only later, brighter and brighter objects. The The last object he would be able to see is the sun, which in time he would learn to see as that. Understanding that the sun, what the sun is, requires the free person to learn and experience new things in this new universe. So suppose this person is turned around. Why would they have anger, and why would they have fear, and why would they have this kind of disposition? Because they've been freed. Why would they still have some of these negative dispositions? Because they've been deceived their whole life. And so now they're getting this realization that the gig is up, right? Why might they see shadows first? Because their eyes are adjusted to the dark, right? And then later they see brighter and brighter eyes. Have you ever asked yourself, why do people keep doing the same goofy things over and over again, right? Why is recidivism so high with certain folks but not with other folks? And I would suggest because they're going back to their comfort zone, what they know. So let's hit to the meat of this. Once thus enlightened, so to speak, the freed prisoner would no doubt want to return to the cave to free his fellow bondmen. Makes sense, right? I'm out. I want to go back and get the rest of my folks, right? Descending back into the cave would require the freed prisoner's eyes to adjust again. And for a time, he would be inferior at the ludicrous process of identifying shapes on the wall. The freed person would no doubt tell the captives of his experiences outside the cave. His descriptions and language would be difficult for them to interpret and understand. This would cause confusion, fear, and anger in them as it did in him. Many of the prisoners would not want to be free. Wait a minute. Here's someone who says, I know a way out, I can help you, but why would many of the prisoners not want to be free? What's that? Because they can't relate to this person, right? Why else would they not want to be free? They don't know that they're unhappy. Change is scary. There was something back here. It's all they know, right? Let's read this last sentence. His attempts to free them would make his fellow prisoners murderous towards anyone who would attempt to free them. So they would rather kill the messenger than actually listen to the message of change. Have we seen that in American history? Have we seen that in the history of the world? What are some examples of people who said, we can be different than what we are, here it is, but the people who said, we'd rather get rid of you than actually listen to your message? Examples? Jesus Christ, right? He said, I have a different way of being and thinking, and here it is. And they said, give us Barabbas, right? That's the bad guy. Where else have we seen that? Abraham Lincoln, he said, I have a different way. I have something I want to do that's different than what we did before. And it culminated with the Civil War. We'll talk about that too, right? Gandhi said to Great Britain, we gotta get a divorce, and we're gonna do this thing. And he also said to Pakistan and India before they separated, he said, we're going to stay together. We're not going to let the British Empire separate us into two people. We're going to do this together. And how did his unifying message get met? He was assassinated. Dr. King said, we've been operating like this for far too long. We can do it differently, and we can do it better. And what did his message get met with? So today, what I'm going to present to you is, I'm going to present to you some things that are challenging to you, but please don't kill the messenger. Think about the message. Think about the message. So let's go over to page 1. Back to page 1. So people will talk about the fact, we have this mandatory training, and this stuff we're supposed to do this stuff, and this it's unfair, it's not right, and we're being prejudged, and all this kind of stuff. And I do want to say, as part of why put on the badge. We kind of take some of that stuff, right? We don't have to take it all, but we have to recognize that that's part of some of the stuff that comes with what we do. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. But I want to talk about this preamble to the Constitution, because people will say, well, we're in this cultural sensitivity stuff, and when does it end? Right? So I have to call trans people by different pronouns, and I have to do all this other stuff, and there will be pundits that will try to convince us to act outside of our own best interests. So when does it end? Right? When is the end of that? Well, one of the things I like to think about is instead of just thinking about the end, I want to think about the beginning. So when does this stuff start? Right? So, Declaration of Independence, paragraph 2. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Good stuff. Good stuff. Preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That means those who come behind us. We do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. If you don't believe those great words, you and I might have a personal problem. Those are beautiful words. Beautiful words. How well have we done in living up to our beautiful words? So we'll talk about that. So when we talk about this idea of how we're to interact with one another, we have to recognize the context that we're in, right? So if you go to page 3, and it's marked with the written number 3, what I'd like for you to do is I want you to draw, as best you can, your family tree going back 3 generations. Your family tree going back 3 generations. If you don't know people's names, that's fine. Roles is just great. So that would include your siblings or their siblings. But just want to give you a couple of minutes to start your family tree or your family constellation. All right. Parents, grandparents, grandparents. Blended families count, right? So blended families, adopted families, families you've created, all those things count. All right, wherever you are on that, I'd like for you to put a star next to anyone who is noteworthy in that family tree. Like somebody that people talk about a lot in your family tree. So who are some people that get talked about a lot? And it can be something positive or something negative, right? So this is a person that did something dynamic or they did something dastardly, right? So who gets talked about? So put a star next to those people who we talked about. So with one of those folks that you put a star next to, I want you to put, what are the words that are used to describe that person? What are some words that are used to describe that person? Kind, gentle, smart, intelligent, a liar, a thief, a drunk. All right. So what I'd like for you to do next is to put a time frame on when you think those words that the person was known for. When do you think that? What time frame is that? Was that in their childhood? Was that in their middle adulthood? Was that late in their adulthood? And what kind of time frame would that be? Right. So it was the 1950s, 1940s, 1930s. And lastly, then I'll leave you alone and we'll have some conversations about that. Where was the person when those words might be applied to? Were they inside the United States? Were they outside of the United States? Were they in war? Were they on a farm? Were they in an urban area? Were they in a suburban area? Where were they when those kinds of words that were used to describe them would be applied? Cool. What I'd like to do is give about 2 minutes for you to get an elbow partner, and feel free to share about that person that we just talked about as much as you like, or as little as you like. I'll give 2 minutes. If each person has an elbow partner, that's roughly about a minute apiece to talk about that. All right. So you have 2 minutes starting now. Four, three, two, one, and so in your conversations, what did you discover about yourself? What did you discover about your family constellation as you thought about that person that you ended up starring? What came up for you about that person? Yeah, respect for the person. Why?
Because the things you heard, you really apply it.
How's the things that you heard about the person? You have respect for that person. What else did you notice about that person? What's that? They held things together. They were a pillar of the family. Other folks. You never met the person yourself. And there are lots of stories that are handed down about that person. Does anybody have anything that was not so positive? No? That's cool. what might be, what might have been after having me think about the words that were used to describe that person, the times that they grew up, and the places they grew up. What might have been after? So A, how long it sticks with a person. I don't know about you, so I did this, so it's called, the exercise is called a genogram. I did it after the therapy. And so we were going through some stuff, and we were talking about some patterns that were reoccurring in our family. And we started thinking, and I looked at some of those patterns, both of success and of failure, so it is both. And I started to see some commonalities in those things. And for the people who had these mass failings, it was interesting that so my mom has 9 brothers and sisters, and so they all have different levels of success, right? So some are taking the alternative route of success, and others are taking the traditional route of success. I have an uncle who spends a lot of time in camp. That's code word for jail, right? And so, so he spends a lot of time in camp. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And then once I understood the context, some of his behavior, it did not excuse his behavior, but I got to understand why one might act or make the choices that he did given the context. And what I'd like to suggest to you is that whoever that person was, you come out of that same context that produced them, right? You come out of that context, because we're all connected. So, and that's important because if you turn it to the next page, we're going to talk a little bit about our paradigms. Now, what I want you to recognize about those folks that you had in your genogram or your family constellation or your family tree is that they live under this just as we do. Life is hard. Life is hard. And a guy that I'm reading right now, his name is Jordan Peterson, he says, to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life. With eyes wide open, it means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitual order. Sounds like the blue line to me, but I'm going to keep going. It means adopting the burden of self-consciousness, vulnerability, and accepting the end of unconscious paradise of childhood, where finite and morality are only dimly comprehended. It means willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive and meaningful reality. It means acting to please God in the ancient language. That's his language. So life is hard. It's hard for all of us. But here's the beauty of life is navigating life. Figuring out how to navigate life. He also says this: some people denigrate into the hell of resentment and the hatred of being. Most of us refuse to do so despite their very suffering and disappointments and losses and inadequacies and ugliness. And again, the miracle for those with eyes to see it. So most of us, we persevere through life. But whatever greatness or failings that you come out of, ultimately, you're responsible for your own behavior. One of the things, and I'll be honest about this, is we have this segment of our stuff around implicit bias. I personally think that some of that is unnecessary to talk about, because ultimately it doesn't matter whether I have those things, it's what I do with them or not, right? So we'll talk more about that in just a second. So right there on page 4, what I'd like for you to do is create a piece of pie relative to the size of what you know of everything there is to know. Create a piece of pie the size of what you know of everything there is. It's all science, all math, all. So that is what you know. Okay. What I want you to do now is to get a second piece of pie. And the second piece of pie is the stuff that you know you do not know. And I want you to quantify that. because there's a third piece we're going to address in just a second. So there's what you know, and then there's what you know you don't know. What are some examples of things you know you don't know? Just three. Three right here, three examples. So if you guess.
I don't know how to do math very well.
All right, great. Please raise your hand if you also know you don't know how to do math very well. Right? I mean, advanced math, playing, all that stuff. Okay, cool. Two more. What's something you don't know? What happens when you die? Please raise your hand if you know you don't know what happens when you die. I mean, okay, cool. All right. See, I like honest people. I like that. All right, lastly. One thing that you know you don't know. What other people are thinking, right? So we have what we know, we have what we know we don't know, and we have, what's the third piece of pie? Is what we don't know, or you can write the word blind spot. You write the word blind spot in that third piece. So if we add all three of those pieces together, we will come up with something that I'll refer to as a paradigm. And a paradigm is simply the way you see the world, right? The way you see the world. Yuri Bronner would suggest that there are different layers to this paradigm, and I won't go into all the stuff. You can see that in the PowerPoint if you wish. But the paradigm. So whose responsibility was it to give you your first set of worldviews, or your first paradigm? Your parents, your guardians, the people who raised you, right? Where did they get their paradigm? From their parents, from their guardians, from the people who raised them. And where did they get their paradigm? Right? It is a gift that keeps on giving. Have you ever received a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy? After it's been multiplied that many times, or copied that many times, does it look exactly like the original? I would suggest probably not. Right? And so oftentimes we're operating with worldviews, with paradigms that were given to us, and for the most part, we don't have a reason to question them. An example of that is three women cooking a holiday meal. The mom is in there, she's cutting this meat in half. Let's say it's a turkey. She's cutting this turkey in half, and the daughter comes in and sees this mayhem. It's like, Mom, what are you doing? And the mom says, I'm cutting the meat in half. And the daughter says, why? And she says, because it makes it tender, and it changes the texture of the meat. And the daughter's still horrified by the scene, and she presses her a little further and says, Mom, I still don't understand. And the mother, being frustrated, says, go ask your grandmother. And so the daughter goes to the grandmother and says, Grandmother, Mom asked me to ask you why she's cutting this meat in half. And the grandmother says, because I did. And now the daughter's confused. She's like, well, why? Why did you do it? And the mother laughs. She said, baby, that's the only way it would fit in my oven. So now the mother has an oven that is adequate for this meat, for this turkey, but she's doing something just because she's seen it done before. And she has no reason to challenge it until she's presented with new and different information. Is it possible that the way that we've been taught, that we've seen the world, there may be more to that? Many of you have experienced that. It's funny, there was a story on NPR where a young lady goes to college, and she is so excited about the cafeteria at her university, right? And the other students are like, why are you so excited? And she's like getting tons of stuff every day. She's, and she doesn't care about her meal plan. And she's just so excited about this thing. And one of her friends asked her, well, why are you so excited? She's like, well, at home, we had chicken every day of my life. And so now with this new revelation that not everybody did that, she goes back to her parents and she says, Mom, Dad, why do we have chicken every night? And the mother looks at her and said, you like chicken. But now she's in a new environment and she can see that the world has so much more to offer. And I'm sure you've experienced little tiny pieces of that even in your upbringing. And so I want to help to bring that humanity to the work that we do, right? All right, so we'll do a couple more things and we'll take a break at 2:05. Is that fair? All right, cool. So let's go to page 5, the next page. What I'd like for you to do is, this is a self-assessment for you. What I'd like for you to do is to tell me, you can use whatever time frame you want for this exercise. Tell me, what did parents and families, what did your friends, what did school and workplace, what did TV and movies, what did you learn from personal experience about each of these categories going across the top? So, African Americans, European Americans, Latina Americans, Asian Americans, disabled Americans, Native Americans. So what did you learn from these folks on the left-hand side? If it was something positive, I want you to put a plus. If it was something negative, I want you to put a minus. If it was never anything you talked about, I want you to put a 0. All right? So pluses, minuses, and zeros. You can have pluses and minuses in the same box, but the size of your plus and the size of your minus will dictate how much you learn. So lots of positive, big plus. A little bit of negative, a little minus. And if it's never anything you talked about, a 0. All right? So I'll give you just a couple of minutes to do that. You can stop right where you are. The rest you can do at another time. But I want you to think about, so as you were going through pluses, minuses, and zeros, and I don't need to know what you have pluses and what you have minuses and zeros, but as you're looking at going through that process, what came up for you as you were thinking about that? What kinds of things were going through your mind as you were thinking about those categories? Yes, please.
So mostly zeros from their parents right? So as we see on both ways of health and I grew up in Indian, so there was a lot of other around.
Okay. So I'm going to repeat what you said for the rest of the room. But she said she grew up in the evening, and she had a lot of zeros compared to family around the race category. And mostly because there was not a whole lot of diversity around when you grew up. Is that correct?
And not a lot of it economic diversity either, so all of our experiences were good.
So all of your neighbors, all the interactions and connections with the village. Other folks, what did you notice about the pluses, minuses, and zeros as you were going through that? You had a lot of boxes with pluses and minuses? Yeah. Anybody else have boxes that had both pluses and minuses? Yeah.
And then just briefly, like what was actually taught, like what was taught or what was just like,
Yeah, so what was actually taught as a lesson, and then what things did you just pick up from interactions, right? Good self-analysis. Good self-analysis. With human beings, if we don't have discussions about stuff, what ends up happening? What do we end up doing? As human beings, what do we end up doing? If we don't have discussions about stuff, what do we end up? Say it.
You fill in the blank.
You fill in the blanks. You fill in the blanks, right? So my daughter calls this a cell phone. And from a 3-year-old point of view, it makes sense because it's used by myself. It is my cell phone. But I couldn't let her keep going on like that, as cute as that was, so I had to sit down and tell her that it is called a cell phone. And so otherwise she'd be 30 years old saying, hey, can I borrow your cell phone? So I had, she goes in the gaps, but I have to set her straight. So let's do this. Let's take a 6-minute break and then we'll come back. All right, we're solving the world's problem, and then folks having your let's go to page 6 really quick. And I want you to answer this question because this is one of the things the board, the whole board, and the outline and all that kind of stuff is wants us to talk about. So we'll talk about that in a second. So I just want to address this really quick. Carried by 6 versus tried by 12. Anybody ever seen or heard someone? Okay, cool. What is meant by that?
It means that you get into difficult situations that may require you to use deadly force and making a split-second decision. And it's better to have somebody try you and determine whether your actions were appropriate as opposed to, well, dead.
All right, so deadly force. Anyone heard it in any other context? All right, cool. So, what's challenging about a statement like that? What's challenging? That there's only 2 choices, all right? So that's challenging. And it's either me or you. I don't know about you, but I like having more choices. I'm not, I like having more choices. And so, what is our first job? Our first job is to go home at night. And to be quite honest, I hope you do everything in your power to make sure that that is true every night. Simultaneously, when you're interacting with me, guess what my goal is? I want to go home too. Even if I'm not doing the right thing, I still, give me my fair, balanced, let me my punishment, let me go on. And so that's an important thing to kind of recognize. I know that wanted to hit a couple of other places, but my math didn't work. So what is this concept of race? What is race? What is race? There's a little place right there. I want you to kind of put down your, write down your definition of race. Right, it says, what is race? It's a big white
Page
space
6.
right here. Yep, or any place you want. All right, so how would you define a social construct used to categorize people? You had a very good liberal professor. Something that divides us. Puts us in the category. There are physical differences. There are physical differences, and I cannot disagree with that. However, I think the causality of those physical differences is one that we need to recognize.
And also where people originated from originally that brought different physical differences to people over time.
And I would suggest that, in fact, is not a race. That might be a climb, C-I-C-L-I, we'll get to both of those in just a second, right? So how many races are there? How many races of people are there? So you say 1, all right? I'm down with that. I can support that, right?
I'm not sure how many NCIC calculate.
So how many boxes do they give you? But most of us, when we fill out some kind of form for employment or some interaction with currency, they want us to fill out one of those boxes, right? So there are multiple boxes. And so I would suggest, I go with you, there is in fact only one race in this country.
That's what my other input was.
What's that?
My other input was.
They say there's only one race. Yeah. So what I will also submit is that the social categorization that we use for race is incomplete. Right? So people say, well, it's a social construct. And I want to say that falls very short on actually talking about what race is. So Ford F-150, all things considered, no matter what the color, you put it any place on the planet and it is still what? Oh, so many haters. Why are there so many Ford haters up in here? I just saw the new Ford Ranger. I thought that was cool. Are you guys Chevy people? What? Okay. sorry. Well, I didn't know what kind of room I was in. So you take a Chevy Silverado, right? What's popular with Chevy? Is it the Silverado or what's that? Okay. Is that a heavy duty or light both? Okay. I'm gonna just start with GMC, but then I don't know if what it is.
Fancy Chevy.
Oh, is that Chevy? Oh,
Fancy Chevy.
Anyway, so, but the point is that if it's anywhere on the planet, for all intents and purposes, it is the same. What I would suggest is that race is not the same, right? Race is not the same. So let's flip to the next page. No, before you do that, page 6. Look at those 3 women. What do you notice about those 3 women? What races would you equate those women with?
Photoshop.
You would equip them with Photoshop, right? It's the same people who use the college application process that did this, right? The interesting thing is that it is in fact the same way, just different Photoshop filters, right? And so this idea of race is very much like that. You know, we'll speak to that in just a second. So turn to the next page. So a large part of my career was spent as the affirmative action officer for Anoka County, and so I had interactions with HR and the EEO, which is the Equal Employment Opportunities, and these are all functions of government, very much like your function. And so this is what the EEO says about race. So employers are required to attempt the following employees to use self-identification to complete the EEO report. If an employee declines to self-identify, employment records or observable identification may be used. All right? So have you ever encountered someone who said, I'm not playing this game, I'm not going to fill out that form, I'm not going to put my race in there because I'm human. What does this suggest? What does that last sentence suggest? Right, it's going to happen, whether you do it or somebody else does it, right? So that's interesting. So then let's go to how the U.S. government starts to define this idea of race. So race and ethnic designations as used by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission do not denote scientific definitions of anthropological origin. What does that mean in plain English? So there is no scientific basis to race, and it doesn't matter where you're from. And then they talk about what these races are, right? So let's go down to the first big category, and I find this very interesting. Hispanic or Latino, a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South or Central American, or Spanish culture of origin, regardless of race. So Hispanic is regardless of race, but it's Mexican, Puerto Rican, South and Central American, and other Spanish-speaking cultures. It's Hispanic. We'll keep going, I'll come back to it in just a second. American Indian or Alaskan Native. A person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, who suggests some qualifiers, right? So here comes some qualifiers. So American Indians are these persons having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, who maintain cultural identification through tribal affiliation or community attachment. Okay? So that is the definition of race. So what happens if I don't have community attachment and I don't have tribal affiliation?
You could be Latino.
Then I could be Hispanic or Latino, right? Right? So interesting. Asian. Any persons having origins of any of the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asian, or the Indian subcontinent, including, for example, Cambodia, China, India, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, Philippine Islands, Thailand, and Vietnam. Does anybody know people from any of these groups? Do people from these different places all look the same? Not even close. same category of Asian. This is one of my favorites right here. Black or African American. A person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. Any of the black racial groups of Africa.
Unless they live in South America.
Unless they are Cuban or live in South America, and then they are Hispanic. All right, so here we go. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, a person having origins of any of the original peoples of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, and other Pacific Islands. Lastly, white. Not European American, not Caucasian, it just says white. This is the federal government of the United States saying white, right? A person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Didn't we just say people from Africa were black, but not people from North Africa? What's that? Oh, you have to be in a group to be black, right? So I think it's, other places, Asian, or Native American, or Asian, or whatever. And then when it comes to like us, it's black and it's white, right? I think that's interesting. I also think that it's interesting that a person you. Okay, so who's missing out of this list? So I don't want to go much further down this list. But this list seems somewhat arbitrary. Right, and how they're grouping. But the real lesson, so to say that it is a social construct isn't complete until we get this particular piece. Who's missing as we look at those human people groups that they've written down? Russians are not in this list. Ukrainians are not in this list. Why are Ukrainians and Russians and Czechoslovakians not in this list?
They haven't figured out what they are yet.
Because our enemies are not human. This is not about honoring or looking at humanity. This is a political document. This is politically motivated. Right? So if I am Ukrainian, where am I Asian? It doesn't say I'm Asian, but I look white. I mean, so this stuff is really arbitrary. But the problem isn't its arbitrariness. It is the reality that people base things off of this, right? So on the same page, there are two pictures. One is crisscross, make you jump. Anybody remember crisscross? Right? What was their claim to fame?
They were Rob's favorite group.
Are you at the weddings like?
Yeah.
Is he? What was the group from Boston that had all their stuff? It was like. Oh yes, Marky and the Funky. No, it was some House of Pain. Was that right? No. Yeah. Oh. What's that? They weren't from Boston. Where were they from?
Let's say they were from Boston.
Okay. All right. Cool. No, so same kind of time frame, right? But what made crisscross like famous? What was it? Backwards clothes, right? Now, here's something that's interesting. What was also happening at the same time that they were wearing backwards clothes, kind of in the urban hip hop scene? People were also they were sagging their pants, right? Now, 20 years later, are people wearing their clothes backwards? No, they're not, right? But it is interesting that people are still sagging their pants. Has anybody seen that phenomenon? Right? And it's so funny, particularly when we go to the suburbs, because kids will have pants that fit them, right? Or they meet the skinny jeans, and they still figure out how to pull them down. It's just the most interesting thing. Now, when I first started at St. Paul, I came from St. Louis, and St. Louis was just like It's the realest. Like, if you want to be real, it's the realest. And so I came to St. Paul, and I was working down in Frogtown. The school was on the University of Weaver, and many of you know Frogtown area, kind of the midway area of St. Paul, and kind of a rougher kind of, for Minnesota. Rougher area, and so I had these white kids who would come in, pat to the side, and all this kind of stuff. And we had a derogatory, where I came from, we had a derogatory term for white boys who did that kind of stuff, and white girls, right? I won't say that. But we'd also, the more politically correct way to talk about that was that they were acting black. Right? What? And this is at the same time that Eminem was real popular too. I don't know if you guys know Eminem. He's not there. Anyway, so all this stuff, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on with these kids. And when I understood what was going on with them, then I could understand their behavior. I could understand what they were doing, right? So why were my white kids in Frogtown, hat to the side, they got their little swag on, the pegs, the pants are sagging? Why are they doing those things? Brain damage? They want hip dysplasia? Why were they doing those things? To fit in, right? So the context was demanding certain types of behavior from them, and they said, I will do those things so that I can survive in that context. And so I would say other kids who dress like that. And so I wanted to understand the context that they were in and give them tools necessary to live in that context, but also know there's another context that you could live in too. And you need to know the rules of that context. So there are a couple of things that I think are barriers to our authentic humanity, which is that we are all one race and human race, right? So some of those barriers are all those things that the EEO suggests, that we divide and conquer. They divide and they conquer who we are. And so there are 5 ways to think of that when it's kind of challenging. One is this idea of historical trauma. Can you imagine someone stealing your vehicle, and it's your neighbor across the street? They steal your vehicle, you come home, it's missing, the next day you look and it's in their driveway. What do you do to that neighbor? What happens next? You confront them. You go knock on the door and you say, that's my car. What do you do with my car, right? And then they say, you know what? It's not your car, it's my car. And then you elevate that, right? So you may, call the police or the sheriff, and they can take a report, and then that goes to court. And what if the judge says, you know what? It was your car, but it's their car now. What would you say about that? You got the wrong judge, right? You have some serious problems with that, right? And let's say that there's nothing you can do about getting your car back. So you have to watch this person using your car day in and day out. And then the next spring, they come to you and they say, you know what, we're going to enter this car into a car show for childhood leukemia. And I was wondering if you can help me polish this car up so that we can present it at the car show. What are you going to say to the neighbor?
Give me the keys and I'll take it.
You say, give me the keys and I'll take it. If you're clever, if you're not that clever, you'll probably say no, right? And you'll probably tell them when to take their keys and their car and their leukemia, right? So one of the things I wanted to think about is, for Native Americans, that often for them is the kind of story that they live with every day. And that's what we refer to when we say historical trauma, right? It's the recognition that you lost. you got to deal with the ramifications of that loss, right? While people are mandating how you use the little bit of resources you have left. So typically that is a story around historical trauma. I would suggest that institutional racism. What happened in 1863? What one event happened in 1863 that we should know of? It was the end of The Civil War and the inauguration of the what? The Emancipation Proclamation given by Trump. I mean, Lincoln, right? By Lincoln. I almost said Trump, but I had to backpedaling on both of them, right? By Lincoln. Institutional racism. So what I would suggest is that any institution, and what happened in 1964 that we should be mindful of? The Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? And so, any institution that was established before 1964, or we could go as far back as 1863, might be considered a racist institution because everybody was not allowed to participate in organizations, right? So that's one way to think about that. This other thing, this idea that separates us, is this idea of poverty. And poverty is problematic because we end up blaming the person as opposed to looking at the system that they're dealing with. And we can talk more about that in just a second. And lastly is this idea of whiteness. Whiteness is problematic. Why is whiteness problematic? Why is the concept of whiteness problematic? Because it's just as problematic as the concept of black people. We'll talk about that too. What does whiteness do? How does whiteness work? So when people talk about, when people, and people typically say, people of color think this way or whatever, and I don't know if this is true, but when people talk about white people, what are the assumptions they make about white people? That they have a silver spoon, that they haven't had to have any difficulties in their life. What else? That they're all racist. What else? What's another? So not only have they not had trouble and they're all racist, what else? Oh, white privilege. Oh, I love that, right? So they have white privilege. And what is the common thread for all of those things they put on whiteness? That it applies to all white people, right? When in fact, if you talk to white people yourself, you'll know that not all white people are created equal. What do white people call white people who don't measure up to the level of sophistication that other white people think they should have? They call them trailer trash. They call them what? Rednecks, right? They call them solo cup people, right? All that kind of stuff, right? So the concept of whiteness is oftentimes problematic. And so how should we talk about ourselves and how should we talk about other people? I would say that it's important to go back to what I talked about before, that the ultimate minority is one, and that the ultimate person responsible for your destiny is you. And so we have to build personal relationships that help us to overcome these systemic barriers that are working to divide us. Someone asked me once, Andre, how do you teach, even if we went back to those pluses, minuses, and zeros, right? People would say, well, how do you teach diversity or whatnot to children? And it's the same way you've learned other things. My dad didn't have a curriculum on how to change a tire, but I watched him change a tire enough that he trusted me to change the tire with him, and then I knew how to change a tire. When we think about these, diversity issues and all that kind of stuff, what do our networks look like, right? Do our networks look diverse? And if they do, that presents us with some opportunities to do some things. If you have pluses, if you have zeros or minuses in areas you don't want to have pluses, you don't want to have minuses and zeros, then that is an opportunity for you to do something about it. What I will say is, if you're fine with your life, there's no need to fix it. There's no need to fix it. But if there are ways that you think you could be more effective in your day-to-day activities, your day-to-day interaction, by understanding the Sudanese community, or the Hmong community, or even our brothers and sisters that are in our so-called same racial category, because we don't all think alike, even though we're in similar categories. I'll go up north and see distinct differences between the Catholics and the Lutherans. right? I mean, it's distinct. But people would say they're the same racial category. So I think those personal relationships are extremely important. So let's go over to, let's skip page 8 because I think there's some redundancies that we don't need. I will say, this is something that we need to kind of recognize, is the importance of listening only to movement. Listening to movement. So there are, so this is, you'll have access to this PowerPoint. This is a family of neo-Nazis who are raising children, and this gentleman is interviewing this family. And it's very interesting that the male in this scenario says that he wants to teach his children to be kind and to be nice, and kids can play with kids, and he doesn't want his stuff to carry over to his kids. But what do we already know even about our personal experiences? Is it possible that his stuff will carry over to his children? Yeah, right? So he's trying to teach them how to be kind and nice, but there's this disconnect. And so the question that I want us to start thinking about is not if this person is good or bad or right or wrong, but really think about what has happened to this person that they see the world this particular way, right? But I don't want us to just apply it to them. I want it to apply to us as well, right? So what has happened in my life that has made me think the way that I think, made me engage with the world the way that I do? Because if I can do that for myself, I can extend that to other people as well. This idea of listening only to movement. So one of the things I know about from watching National Geographic is that gorillas are, for the most part, pretty docile creatures until their territory gets encroached on. And when their territory gets encroached on, and this is where we typically see the movie, and they're making lots of noise, and they're beating their chest, and they're showing their teeth, and they're throwing grass. Anybody ever seen that on one of those National Geographic shows, right? You know what the point of that is? It is intimidation. Because what happens if two 500-pound gorillas actually get into contact and get into a fight? What happens? Are there EMTs in the forest? No. So if a gorilla gets injured or hurt, their destiny is death. So they intimidate. They become very flamboyant, and they try to get the other gorillas to go away so that they don't have to actually engage. But we'll see that in school settings. I've seen it with kids. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. By the time you guys talk about this getting each other, the fight could have been over, right? They spend all this time jostling. Oftentimes, when we're interacting with people who we see having a bad attitude, they are trying to get us to think differently, or they're trying to get us away from the goal of why we interact, right? So sometimes, we'll get pulled over, we'll pull someone over, or we'll hold someone accountable because they were speeding or they didn't use the traffic tool correctly, and they will say, "You're just pulling me over because you're racist." What is that? When they're doing that, what are they trying to do? They're trying to deflect from what the original goal of the thing is, right? So so when I taught middle school, my middle school students would try to deflect because I hold them accountable for stuff that we had in the class. And they would say things like, "You're being racist and your breath stinks." Right? Because that's the ultimate, in middle school, right? And I was looking, and they just said that, right? Because they could say so many other things. But you're being racist and your breath stinks. And I go, okay, we'll go with it. I'm racist. I still need your homework. What's that have to do with the homework, right? I'm not suggesting you say those kinds of words, but that's the mentality that I'd like for you to have. So, okay, cool. You think I'm racist? Whatever. We're still going to do this thing. And then later, I would go back and I'd ask myself, or I'd check with my colleagues, in doing this, is that racist? And they're like, no, it's not racist. And then I say, does my breath stink? And they're like, yeah, your breath does stink. So I'm like, oh, okay, so they may have something to argue about, right? So look only to move. And what are we looking, what do we want to see move? So all human beings are moving towards three things. We're looking for safety, we're looking for belonging. And so, however we can give that to folks in ways that, here's something that I want us to really think about. Oftentimes people in authoritarian positions have a rightful way of thinking about the world. We do have the right way of thinking about the world. I know that my parents and grandparents would say things like, if you want this stuff, you have to earn it, right? And it is a very true and wise thing. But if I've interacted with someone that hasn't ever had it, how can they learn to earn it? And it was funny, so back to middle school. I had a kid who was 6'2", 8th grader, about 250, a pretty big 8th grader. He looked like a man, right? And he sat in the back of the class and he said, Mr. A, you got to earn my respect. He was from Chicago, right? You got to earn my respect. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, all right, cool. Can I have a syllabus? What's the syllabus? Can I have a, what's the final exam? How do I know that I've earned your respect? And he was like, I just know. I said, how about this? How about you give me respect and I give you respect? Now here's the kicker. Those of us who are in positions of power and authority, who see ourselves as servants, have to give respect in the face of disrespect. If somebody's nice to you and you're nice to them, well, what is your reward? Can anybody do that? I was in a bar and grabbing some lunch, right? So it was a bar restaurant right on County Road 10 in Mountain View. And so if you don't know about Mountain View, you've got to first know. So I'm in the space and I'm ordering my lunch. And there's a guy, this is 10 o'clock on a Saturday. There's a guy in the bar who's red-faced me. And I'm ordering my stuff and I see him and I know something about him. It's 10 o'clock and he's drunk. So this means that the bar and the bartender, they know this guy. So this is like this is his place, this is his living room, right? And so I order my stuff, I close my menu, and the dude moves to the end of the bar and sits right next to me. And so I'm like, because I'm not afraid of drunk people, you know, I can fight, I can take care of myself if I have to, but they're just unpredictable. And so he's sitting there, and we're doing the thing we do in Minnesota. We start talking about the weather, right? And we chit-chat about the weather, and then he breaks into his thesis as to why he sat next to me. And he says, you know what? I don't like niggers. And I'm not sure how do you follow that? Like, what do you say to that, right? And so I'm doing the Minnesota thing, and so I'm like, how do I get away from this dude? Like, how do I, try what he was saying? And he, and then still small voice that I trust spoke to me and said, engage that. I said, okay. I said, sir, when you use that word, what are you talking about? He says, I'm talking about ignorant, irresponsible, people living off the system, that can't communicate, all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, sir, do you know any white people who fit that description? And he said, yeah, I do. I said, how about those Vikings? So we're talking about the Vikings and that kind of stuff. And then he leans over and he says, you know what, I don't like niggers, but I like you. So and I take another breath and I say, sir, what is it about me that you like? Tell me what you like. And you say, dude, you have the head on your shoulder, you're intelligent, you communicate well, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, all right, sir, what if all the people who you use that name for, all the people that you think look like that, were idiots? All the ones that you've met are idiots. And everybody else that you haven't met yet is just like me. And he looks at me and he says, I gotta pee. And he goes off to the restroom, and I'm like, I'm feeling pretty good now because like we haven't had a major confrontation. My stuff is coming, so I grab my stuff, start heading towards the door, and the guy meets me at the door. He's got his hair is combed over, he's got water driplets on his face, he's got a damn napkin. He hands me the napkin, and he says, I raise chickens. If you ever need fresh eggs, give me a call. So I take the napkin, put it in my pocket, take my bag, go about my day. I never call him. But what happened for him in that interaction?
You didn't react negatively.
I didn't interact negatively. What happened? Okay, let's back up. Would you have understood if I gave that dude a piece of my mind? You don't talk to me like that. What's wrong with you? Why is that? Would you have understood if I did that? Yeah, and what would that have done for him? I'd have solidified everything he thought about people who he thinks look like people. Right? This is the part where it's hard for us. We have the burden of this. We know we're right. We're right most of the time. I know that I'm right. But I'm trying to figure out how to be effective. And in some cases, that makes me look foolish, it makes me look vulnerable, it makes me look weak, but I'm actually trying to be a bridge that carries someone over to something else. And so when we think about the stuff, the very human tendency is for us to well up with pride and to take things personal. And I want you to take them personal because it is personal, but I also want you to recognize what needs to happen for you to be effective. Okay? And it is not effective to be a punching bag for people all the time. But it is also not helpful to not engage people because we're afraid of being a punching bag. Outside of this space, I'm a pretty nice guy, and I oftentimes get frustrated, and my wife gets frustrated because she feels like people think it's negative. And of my kindness and of my graciousness. But what's the alternative? I don't know that I want to be any other kind of person. Right? So let's go over to page 11. And this is still off the same heels and wheels of the things we've been talking about. And this is something I call the animal farm, right? So I'm somewhat of a hippie too, right? Some of these new wave hippie kind of thing. So I had a flock of chickens in my backyard, so we were getting fresh eggs and that kind of stuff. My father-in-law calls me foolish because I paid $6 a bird. In Montana, he can get 50 birds for $6, right? So, but that's what we do because we're hippies like that. Organic, we do our own stuff, all this stuff. So, have you ever recognized? Has anyone ever tried to buy organic stuff? Period. Right? All right. What do you recognize about organic stuff? Period. It's expensive stuff. What about the chickens, right? Chickens or their eggs, expensive or pretty expensive? Right? Why are organic chickens and eggs expensive? Why are they expensive? So it costs more to raise them, right? Because you usually have a smaller, they have what, free range or open range where the chickens can run around and that kind of stuff. So there's fewer chickens. Right? What else? More certifications for the government. That gosh darn government in everything, right? Yeah, so more certifications. What else? People want them. The market demands that people have these chickens. And they are said to have a healthier, a humane life, which I think is funny. Chickens having a humane life, right? So no antibiotics, they get sunlight, they can run around, they can stretch, and all that kind of stuff. So one might consider that those chickens have privilege. One might say that they have privilege, right? But let's talk about conventionally raised chickens. What are their existences like? What are their existences like? What's that? Pretty dirty, right? They're crammed into small spaces. And I have heard that people used to put glasses on the chickens so they wouldn't cannibalize themselves. But I think now they just cut off the beak, right? And so that doesn't happen. And so because they're in cramped spaces, it's dirty. And so since it's dirty and they're in cramped spaces, what have they had to introduce into those colonies? Antibiotics, drugs, right? So there's drugs in the community, it's nasty in the community, everybody's in a confined space, and one might suggest that those chickens don't have privilege. One could draw a conclusion they don't have privilege. Now here is the irony of both of those chickens. Whether it's a free-range chicken or a conventionally raised chicken, what is the purpose of their existence? To be thin. So when people talk about white privilege, I think that's really funny because what they're suggesting is that we're all going to be fed into this machine. It's just at what vantage point will we have as we hit the value. The rat race, the funny thing about the rat race is you're still, you win, you're still, right. So there's that. So I want to go to the next page, page 12. And I want us to just think about this place called the Hood. Now, in your community, the Hood may have had a different name, right? What were some of the names for the place called the Hood where you grew up? The trailer court. Section 8. What's that? Ghetto. The ghetto. Right? And I always think it's funny because many of those places have the hyphen side. Like it's the west side, east side. And it's just interesting. I don't know how that happens, but it's just interesting. And so, what I would suggest to you is that there's a way that you can look at this and say there are tons of deficits in this place. Why would somebody want to live there? And what I would suggest also is that people would want to live there because they find value in that space too. You said before, life is hard, but the beauty of life is navigating, right? So people can navigate. So there are assets as well as deficits. And so one of the things that I'd like to kind of leave you with is this idea that that comes out of the work of Ruby Payne. Ruby Payne does a lot of cultural work. So her stuff isn't directly tied to race, but I think one could make those connections. And so what she suggests is that people in poverty are really relationally oriented. So people will say, well, why are all of those poor people having all of those babies, right? Because they can't get a ticket to go to Switzerland and chill in the Alps, right? So what do? They chill in their home. So in terms of possession, people in poverty, they got a family. Middle class is things, the accumulation of things. And people in wealth, it's uniqueness, that one of a kind, this, that, or the other thing. In terms of money, poverty, people in poverty look at it as something that can be spent. Middle class looks to save it, and the wealthy look to invest in it. The activity of spending and investing are the same activity, but what is different? What is the difference between spending and investing? It's expecting a return, right? It's expecting a return. Time, the present, middle class history, legacy, destiny, fate, choice, manifest destiny, meaning that it's predetermined that I'm going to to be successful or wealthy. In terms of people of poverty, family structures are typically yes, women run, right? In middle class families, it's typically ran by the father or men or patriarch, and in systems of wealth, typically whoever has the most wealth, right? And so those are things to important to think about. So let's go over to page 13. Not sure how I can set those things. So steeple chase. So we all have, so life is difficult, right? So we all have things to overcome. The one thing that I'd encourage us to ask ourselves is this question: is there something wrong with minorities? And I use that language very specifically. And if the answer is yes, then we have to get scientists on top of figuring out what's going on with minorities and get them a vaccine. And if not, then we should look at our economic and our social systems to see why it is folks aren't rising or interacting the way they are. I would suggest that we're also looking at ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences that change how people interact with the world. So there is that. And the big piece that I wanted to do, all right, so lastly, change the conversation on the page 14. Important to change the conversation. And we know that bigotry is not about a lack of intelligence, it is an emotional state. That prejudice is a mindset, and discrimination is a bigger factor. And cognitive behavioral therapy says if we can engage our emotions and take control of our thoughts, then those will help us take control of our behaviors. Okay? And so the law says we will take care of discrimination. Now, which branch of our three-tier government can we operate in? Are we would be the executive, right? Which means that we don't make laws, we only execute those laws, right? And so when we think about discrimination, the law says it will take care of discrimination. 1964 Civil Rights Act was a landmark piece of legislation that says that the government will offer penalties and rewards for certain kinds of behavior around discrimination. Did that end discrimination? No, it did not end discrimination, right? So why do we still have discrimination today? I would suggest that if we look at emotions plus thoughts equal behaviors discrimination is still present. And that's because we have not addressed prejudice or bigotry. And that is on so-called both sides or all sides, right? And so if we want to decrease our implicit bias, I would suggest that we have to increase, in many ways, our humanity, our recognizing that we're born into this world just like everybody else, and that we need to show our humanity as much as I can. Also recognize that there are, as my father-in-law was talking, these bad hombres. There's bad hombres. There are people whose only existence is to cause chaos and confusion and to fight. But that is such a small minority of the folks that we interact with. Unfortunately, a lot of times they are a vocal group that do that, right? So I do want to offer you that. And I want to offer you the fact that there's dignity, honor, and dignity. Dignity is something that we have, it's also something that we can give. Honor is the highest level of respect, and I have that for you. And please raise your hand if you passed the test that made you eligible to be born. None of us did anything to bring ourselves here. And so when we interact with others, I think it's important to help recognize that too. And I also, the tool that I'll offer you, many of you probably know this, because you're good at what you do, is yes and, right? So yes, you may say that about me, and we need to deal with this situation. Or, and is there another way to think about that? And is there, so yes, and. And then lastly, on page 15, and let's stop right there, you see those three diagrams. So we've tried all sorts of things to kind of move the needle, if you will, on diversity or including everybody and all sorts of stuff. When does the real liberation happen? When does the real freedom occur? If we look at this diagram, when does real freedom occur? When we take out those obstacles, right? We take out the obstacles that block people. A couple of things, pieces of homework, and I'm not going to, I apologize, I lied, I didn't know I was going to lie. But, so one of the things that we also want to review with is that there are very few accidents that happen in our community. Right? So communities are formed on purpose and with a purpose. And so the house we live in is a set of videos I encourage you to look at that talks about how the impacts of race, although race is not, it is a governmental structure, it has been used as currency to ration goods, jobs, services, and money. Right? So, and redlining is one of those ways. People said we don't want certain kinds of people in our neighborhood, and they draw lines to box people out of access. And what's the great thing about owning a home? What do you gain by owning a home? You said that. What's the other part? Equity. Equity, right? And for a large part of American history, not everyone was able to get equity because not everyone was able to get a home, and get equity. So thank you so much for being attentive. Thank you for your time. For any time to come on and deliver anything that you with you, for you, around you, let me know. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Paper roll, folks. I think we'll take 2 at a time to your. Where's that? Where's that? In the hall.